Eugenio Suarez cannot be stopped. In 62 games since July 1st, he is batting .328 with 22 homers, 60 RBI, and an OPS over 1,000. Welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on Thursday, September 12th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White and Chris Towers. Today on the show, we had a few no-hit/perfect game bids from Bowden Francis and Bryan Woo. We'll talk about those very early on. We got 4 hitters who've gone ice cold in the second half. What to do with those names? We are going to take a peek into the 2025 crystal ball and much more. But let's jump in.
Wow! Hey now! Hey now! Hey now!
All right. We will start with Scott. You're up. Player of the night.
All right, let's do Bowden Francis, who, as you mentioned, had a no-hit bid, and it was actually the second time in 18 days that he took a no-hitter into the 9th inning. The Blue Jays ended up losing the game, by the way, because Chad Green suddenly doesn't know how to get anybody out, but we're not going to get into that now. Bowden Francis certainly pitched well, and he's done nothing but pitch well since joining the rotation. This now makes it 4 starts in his last 6 where he's allowed just 1 hit while going at least 7 innings. So he has been as unhittable as a pitcher could be. And speaking as probably the one on this podcast who was most open-minded to the possibility of him actually being a worthwhile fantasy option as soon as he joined the rotation. I would like to revel in the success that he's had, but I feel like I'm just a little too honest for that. And because my reaction to the way he's pitching right now is there's no way Bowden Francis could possibly be this good. He may be solid. He's clearly has a knack for hit prevention and pretty good control and all of that. And I know that this success has coincided with the introduction of a splitter, which itself doesn't have particularly impressive characteristics. But there's no way he could possibly be this good. He hasn't been missing bats at a particularly high rate. It was less than a 10% whiff rate, or swinging strike rate, I should say, in this one. Actually, the velocity was down a couple miles per hour on his top 2 pitches, fastball and slider. He just is on a crazy run right now, but it can't, I'm trying to figure out okay, fine, start Bowden Francis now. We've been saying that for a couple weeks, but what is this actually going to mean for him heading into next year? Certainly it means he'll be drafted and he deserves that, but I don't feel like I want to put that big of an investment on him. No matter what happens in his last 3 starts.
So it's just a weird profile, right? He's 28 years old. He was basically a non-factor as a prospect. His minor league numbers are pretty bad overall. He had a decent cup of coffee last year, pitching out of the bullpen mostly. And now he's had 7 awesome starts, I think is the number, right? Yeah. And there's basically nothing outside of this 7-start stretch in his entire major league career or professional career that would suggest that Bowden Francis even has a little bit of fantasy value.
Well, that's why that's where I disagree slightly, because the reason I was open to Bowden Francis being solid is because you look at his ERA between the majors and minors last year, it was mid-1, I think. So, yeah, I understand the overall minor league history isn't that good, but it's more recent history has been good.
To be fair, he had 30 good innings between A-ball and AAA, and then 36 good innings in the majors last year. I'm being unnecessarily flippant. But my point is that I kind of believe in it, and not this, right? It goes without saying. What was it? 4 out of 5 starts, he's allowed 1 hit?
4 out of 6, 1 hit. And then another one of those, he allowed 3 hits.
You don't have to say that he's not actually that good. Nobody is actually that good. that nobody is 138 ERA or whatever it is since he returned to the rotation. Like it's that it goes without saying. But above average strikeout rate, 24% for the season. Really good control, 5.6%. And average quality of contact, 361 expected WOBA on contact. Again, nothing about this run is sustainable. We are seeing a 99.9 percentile from Bowden Francis. But can you throw him in the Seth Lugo mold? I think that's possible. And what we're seeing right now from Seth Lugo is like an 85th percentile outcome season, where if everything clicks, this type of pitcher can be really good for fantasy. I don't believe that Seth Lugo is actually this good. You know, we talked about it yesterday. He's got a 3.82 ERA since the All-Star break. I think that's probably closer to his talent level. And that might be close to Bowden Francis' talent level. Mm-hmm. But that's a viable fantasy pitcher.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, yeah. I can get on board with viable. But where does viable need to be drafted next year? That's what
top 200.
Yeah, okay. I mean, if you're talking top 200. Yeah. I mean, top 250. I don't on the late end. Of
Bryan
of a standard 12-team draft.
Seth Lugo was drafted about 250 last year. Mm-hmm. And that was with a bigger sample size last year where he had a 350-ish ERA over 150-something innings.
Right. Definitely more proven.
And, Seth Lugo's not that much older than Bowden Francis. Again, Bowden Francis is 28.
6 years older.
My point being that Bowden Francis is not, a young guy that we should be but he's on the right. Generally speaking, the talent probably isn't getting much better from here, although pitchers are weird. In some ways, he's not that dissimilar from Bryan Woo, who we're also going to talk about shortly, and that he's not an elite strikeout guy, but he's got great control, good quality of contact suppression. The splitter has been a really big I look at it all and it's it's not real, but it's not real, I guess. I don't know exactly the right way to phrase it, but I think he's probably fine.
Yeah.
For fantasy.
I could be wrong about this. I don't think people are going to overreact to this end to the season for Bowden Francis going into next year. Again, I could be wrong about that, but I could see him kind of being in that, 200-ish ADP as a mid to late round sleeper type guy who's in the Blue Jays rotation. Obviously, this stretch has been fantastic. He is an extreme fly ball pitcher, and he's done a really good job avoiding barrels. So that has been the biggest takeaway. I mean, that is how he is avoiding hits as often as he is right now in Bowden Francis.
Well, he's actually, okay, so it's a 45% fly ball rate. I thought it was closer to 40. Yeah, that's a pretty good fly ball rate.
Mm-hmm. I think more so just for this season, he's 82% rostered. He's only 58% started. So despite this amazing stretch, it's not like he's been in everybody's lineup. At least he wasn't this week. Bowden Francis is at the Texas Rangers next week, which has been a pretty good matchup all season long. I feel confident telling people, they should probably have Bowden Francis in their lineups next week.
Well, and he was a one-star pitcher against the Mets this week, so you can understand why people might still be hesitant. And I wonder what'll happen if one of his final starts he just gets bombed.
Yeah.
How much momentum will he lose for 2025 just with one poor outing? I mean, we saw that happen to Spencer Arrighetti, but I liked the skill indicators.
Yeah, I think the skill set's stronger for
Arrighetti.
Yeah.
So I was willing to look past that. I don't think I'd be willing to look past that for Francis. It's very much there's a lot of reasons for skepticism with Francis. That if he closes out the year as strong as he's been, or it doesn't even have to be this strong, obviously. If he's just solid to close out the year, then I will be interested in him with a pick in the late-ish rounds of next year's draft.
I do want to zoom in on this start. I know we've spent a lot of time on it, but
10 minutes on Bowden Francis.
Yeah, and real quick, you might look at it and say, oh, 1 strikeout in 8 innings. It was a fluke. He gave up 24 balls in play in this start. 3 had an expected batting average of 500 or better. Only 7 had an XBA over 200. This was not just a good luck start. The Mets could not do anything against him. I just wanted to say that because that was a pretty bonkers. 21 batted balls with an XBA below 500 is, I don't know if I've ever seen something like that.
Mm-hmm. And we've seen this profile work in the majors, obviously, many times before, where if you could limit walks, you give up lots of fly balls. Yes, you will give up home runs occasionally, but like he did in this one, if you're not walking anyone, it's a solo home run in the 9th inning, which ties the game, unfortunately. But yes, this is a profile that can work for somebody like Bowden Francis. Chris, over to you. From one pretty interesting outlier pitcher to maybe another in Bryan Woo.
Yeah, Bryan Woo, I think, is one of the most interesting pitchers in baseball all of a sudden. And it's funny because early on in the season, I had very little interest in him. I thought he was one of the more obvious sell-high candidates in baseball. And then somehow he went from never pitching deep into games, never throwing more than 80 pitches, not really getting any strikeouts, which strikeout rate's still kind of mid right now. But he's consistently pitching 6 innings or more, basically since the start of August, consistently going around 90 pitches. I think it was 89 in this start. And all of a sudden that makes everything a lot more interesting for him and a lot more sustainable because he's not a big strikeout pitcher, but Bryan Woo over the course of 2 years and about 200 innings at the major league level has been one of, if not the best quality of contact suppressors in baseball. And he does it with an extremely low release point on his pitches. It's like 4th percentile, I think I was reading. There was a good piece on Baseball Prospectus. He gets, good. The fastball's got good characteristics. He's really hard to barrel up. That's one of the things. He either gets ground balls or gets weak flyouts. And that's basically all Bryan Woo gives up. He doesn't walk anybody. It's, 2.4% walk rate. And now he's showing the ability to pitch deep into games, keep the pitch count up. And he's not leaving every start with an elbow soreness like he was earlier in the season. So,
yeah,
I don't quite know what to make of Bryan Woo for 2025, but I'm a lot more interested in his long-term value than I was before the season. And what we're seeing right now is like comparable to George Kirby. I almost said like a more interesting George Kirby because of the quality of contact suppression. Kirby gets more strikeouts, gets more whiffs. That's probably giving Bryan Woo too much credit. But like, I think the ceiling is similar.
So I just wrote an article yesterday, went up on the site yesterday, the 20 biggest risers of the second half, 10 hitters, 10 pitchers. And among the pitchers, Bowden Francis was on there, but also Bryan Woo was on there. And I put the first and second half stats for every player in this article. And the ratios were almost identical for Woo, first half, second half. So like, why is he on here? Why is he a big second half riser? Exactly what you said. He was doing it 4 innings at a time in the first half. And now his 7 longest starts of the season have come in his last 8 turns, and they've all been more than 6 innings, not even just 6 innings. So if Woo's past the forearm troubles and he's able to work deep into games like this, then yeah, he's been exactly the same pitcher no matter how long he's gone, and I think there's a lot of reason to buy into that.
Last 8 starts for Bryan Woo, a 2.42 ERA, 0.75 whip, 45 strikeouts to just 4 walks over 52 innings, along with the hit suppression being one of the best at that. The control, I mean, just 4 walks in this 8-start stretch and all season long. I mean, that's been a calling card for Bryan Woo, is the ability to throw strikes and avoid giving up lots of hits. Somebody on Twitter asked me how I would rank the Mariners starters for next season. I thought it was a really interesting question. My response was, and this is subject to change, whatever, it's September 12th, but Logan Gilbert, Kirby, Castillo, Bryce Miller, and then Bryan Woo. And I added, think all 5 of them could be drafted as top 40 starting pitchers next year, which is crazy.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. Gilbert and Kirby will probably be top 12 for me. So there's, and I guess Castillo wouldn't be far behind, probably top 15, 16. So then there'll be a little bit of a gap between those two and Bryce Miller and Bryan Woo for reasons of provenness and strikeout upside, mainly. But yeah, I think they'll all be top 40. That's obviously the best starting 5 in the majors.
Yeah. All right, players of the night for me. I'm just going to highlight the Dbacks who clobbered the Rangers here, I guess getting their revenge from the World Series. 14-4, 14 runs on 16 hits, including 4 homers. Ketel Marte 3 for 4 with the double and his 31st homer of the year. These were actually his first 3 hits since coming off the IL on September 6th. Corbin Carroll 2 for 5 with a double, a triple, 2 runs scored. Continues his massive second half. Adrian Del Castillo 2 for 4 with his 4th home run and 3 RBI. He had slowed down recently. Previous 12 games, a 200 batting average, 34% strikeout rate for Del Castillo. The playing time had fallen off as well, down to 29% rostered. I know this was obviously a great game, but is Del Castillo now droppable in a 2-catcher league?
2-catcher, yeah, if you see somebody more interesting. I'm not sure there is anybody more interesting in a 2-catcher league.
I think Joey Bart's roster rate is pretty similar. I'd rather have Joey Bart.
Yeah. No, I mean, just for no other reason, because Del Castillo, this was the second game he started in 5, and so once you lose your playing time, he could get it back. He could get back if he goes on a tear here, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of people rushing to pick him up if you drop him. So yeah, that's fine.
And at the top, I mentioned the numbers for Eugenio Suarez, who legitimately has been one of the best hitters in baseball since July 1st. 4 for 4 with a double dong on Wednesday, 4 runs, 2 RBI. And the overall numbers, he's now up to 28 homers on the season, 92 RBI. OPS gets over 800 for the season. There's not really much else to add, or actionable, I guess, on Eugenio Suarez. You're obviously starting him if you have him on your fantasy team. It's just, man, night and day between the first 3 months to boom, once July 1st hit, a completely different hitter from Suarez.
And especially this is, we haven't seen a lot of good stretches from him the last couple of seasons. He's at entering today, he had a 422 WOBA over his previous 62 games. That was the sample size you were going with, right?
It was, last 62 since July 1st.
He has not had a stretch this good since that 2019 season when he had 49 homers and led the NL in homers. So, yeah, there was no real reason to see this coming. The Mariners just dumped him in this offseason. This is one of the more surprising turnarounds I can remember in recent years.
And I don't exactly know what that means for 2025 for Eugenio Suarez, because clearly he's been, in terms of statistical improvement, one of the biggest improvers. I left him off of the 10 risers among hitters because I'm not sure how enthusiastic I'm actually going to be to draft him next year. Certainly his value has gone up. He's gone from being undraftable in all likelihood to somebody who's going to get drafted for sure. But he's going to be 34 years old with a very spotty track record. I presume he's going to be back with the Diamondbacks. They have a team option. I don't know why they wouldn't exercise it. And so how confidently are you going to draft him as your starting third baseman? Not very.
I think he's a corner infielder still, even with this stretch.
Yeah. By the numbers, he deserves to be a starting third baseman. But yeah, I wouldn't want him as mine.
I will say his strikeout rate over this 62 game stretch down to 23.6%. Also the best it's been since 2019.
Yeah,
and the exit velocity, the average exit velocity, has improved since July 1st too. So it's not just the surface level numbers.
And who did the D-backs do all this damage off of, you ask? Well, Chris, you were right yesterday. To bench Cody Bradford, because it was a rough one. 3 2/3 innings, 8 runs allowed, 3 homers allowed in this one. And if you believe in the he was due for a bad start type thing, that's exactly what happened here with Cody Bradford. He's still 65% rostered and 45% started. Will he remain in the rotation? Which sounds like a crazy question, but Rocker getting called up, DeGrom and Scherzer returning.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I was looking at that today because they said they were going to give Jack Leiter a lot of runway, but you'd think he'd be out of the rotation with everybody returning and Kumar Rocker coming up. So I don't know exactly how this is going to shake out. As I pointed out a few times in the last week, the Rangers have the most pitcher-friendly schedule remaining. Once this Diamondback series is passed, it's all good matchups for pitchers. So if I picked up Cody Bradford, hopefully not for this start, but if I picked him up, I would like to hold on to him. I mean, he may line up for 2 starts next week, Blue Jays and Mariners, and I think he'd be a good play. You know, he got knocked around in this start, good offense. He gave up 3 home runs, and a fly ball pitcher, that's the other side of the coin. There are going to be games where they don't give up many hits, but then there are going to be games where they get burned by home runs, and this was obviously the latter for Bradford. But I still think he'd be a good play with good matchups if he remains in the rotation.
Want to give an, oh my goodness gracious, shout out to the Dodgers who hit 4 home runs in the first inning off of Jordan Wicks. Ohtani hit his 47th. Edman hit his 3rd home run, and then Edman would later hit his 4th home run. We'll talk about that later on. Will Smith hit his 18th, and Max Muncy hit his 14th home run. Ohtani also stole another bag later in the game, so now he's up to 47 homers, 48 steals on the season. Let's take our first break, and when we return, we'll hit some news and notes. We'll do that right after this.
Football action continues. Are you ready for this? Ready to take chances? As the gridiron is taken over by the Great White North. It's time to storm the fortress. It's time to fight on the battlefield. Catch the Canadian Football League on CBS Sports Network.
Welcome back in news and notes. Jose Altuve left Wednesday due to right side discomfort, and he seemed to be in a decent amount of pain after a swing in the 5th inning. Manager Joe Espada said after the game that he doesn't believe the injury is serious, but an oblique injury this late in the season could be pretty tricky. And if you're still playing for anything at this point and you have Jose Altuve on your team, you might need a second base replacement. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Ronaldo Lopez was placed on the IL with right shoulder inflammation. He left Tuesday's start after just 1 inning, and his velocity was way down in that start. Kyle Schwarber was scratched from the lineup as he continues to experience soreness in his left elbow. Justin Steele threw a bullpen on Wednesday, his first time throwing off a mound since going on the IL last week. He's slated to throw another bullpen over the weekend. Teoscar Hernandez returned to the lineup after missing 4 straight with a left ankle contusion. Brandon Lau returned to the lineup after missing 5 straight with a sore finger. JT Realmuto is expected to rejoin the Phillies lineup on Friday. He's missed 5 straight with a left knee contusion. Turns out Connor Norby was scratched on Tuesday due to left foot soreness, but was back in the lineup here on Wednesday. I believe he went 0-for-4 in that game. Merrill Kelly left his start on Wednesday due to right hamstring cramping, and he is expected to make his next start in the rotation. Jason Dominguez was out of the lineup against the lefty Cole Reagans, and despite being a switch hitter, Dominguez does have some pretty bad splits against lefties in his minor league career, so I think this is what we probably should expect, at least for the rest of this season, is Dominguez playing against righties, but probably not against lefties. Chas McCormick is headed to the IL with a fracture in his right hand. Edwin Uceta has been suspended for 2 games after it was determined he intentionally hit Nick Castellanos with a pitch on Tuesday. The Padres optioned Luis Campusano to AAA, and it's been a pretty rough season. Big step back from 2023, where, entering this year, we kind of looked at him as a, potential sleeper, breakout candidate. He has some prospect pedigree. Clearly did not work out here for Luis Campusano. The Padres placed Martin Perez on the paternity list, which means he'll miss up to 3 games. And the Big Maple is hanging it up. James Paxton plans to retire after this season. There was lots of news there. Is there anything that you guys wanted to touch on before we move?
Well, yeah, that may be how it plays out for Jason Dominguez. Doesn't Alex Verdugo bat left-handed?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Basic
It was-
knowledge. I should know
Yeah,
that.
it was in the lineup here. over
Yeah.
previous.
So a lot of times managers make a distinction between tough lefties versus just run-of-the-mill lefties. Cole Reagans would obviously qualify as a tough lefty. So I'm not totally sure we'll never see Jason Dominguez play against a lefty, but clearly, as I pointed out when he was called up, it's not a foregone conclusion that he's going to play every day.
Mhm.
I'll also just point out, it kind of goes without saying, but Reynaldo Lopez, even in a best case scenario where he misses the minimum amount of time, you would get one start out of him. That's if he comes back immediately. So I think you can go ahead and drop him.
Okay. Let's take a look at 4 hitters who have gone ice cold in the second half. And no one likes a cold burger. Jake Berger, 0 for 4 with a strikeout here. Last 21 games, 171 batting average, 1 homer, and OPS around 500. Strikeouts, not an issue during this stretch, but he's just not hitting the ball as hard and a decent amount of ground balls. We know in July and August, Jake Berger was one of the hottest hitters in baseball, but here has cooled off in September. Still 86% rostered. You think Berger could be droppable in some shallower formats?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, underlying numbers aren't quite as bad, but they're definitely not as good as they were in July and August. So, yeah, I think you can go ahead and drop them.
The rest of the names on this list are much higher profile, and I don't think that we're going to drop any of them, but you might think about benching. I did not realize how bad some of these guys have really been, but Steven Kwan, 2 for 4 with 2 runs scored on Wednesday. His second half, 198 batting average, 4 homers, 7 steals. Okay, that helps, but a 578 OPS. I mean, maybe it's just regression because he was so hot in the first half of the season, but man, Kwan has really cooled off. What are we doing with him?
Yeah, remember he was batting .352 at the All-Star break. So it's been quite the disparity between the first and second half. I noticed his fly ball rate is up in the second half, so maybe he's, just hitting into too many easy outs. I think for the remaining players on this list, you shouldn't get too caught up in streaks. And I know it's long streaks in this particular case, but things can turn around instantly, like we've seen with Tyler O'Neill this week. Like if you buy into the player's base talent level, you buy into him being somebody who's must roster, clearly too valuable to drop, then for the most part, you kind of have to write him out. I'm not saying I'll never make exceptions, but it would have to be a pretty good exception.
In Kwan's case, he was both enjoying a skills breakout in the first 3 months of the season. His ex-WOBA in all 3 months was 344. He didn't have a single month in either of his first 2 seasons that was better than that. And he was playing well over his head. In addition to that, he had WOBAs of 382, 519, and 437. He was outrunning his WOBA by 80 points through the first 3 months of the season. He has more or less played to his expected WOBA over the past couple of months. So I think what you're probably just seeing is a little bit of regression in both terms of the word. I think at the end of the day, my expectations for him aren't going to be that much different in 2025 than they were in 2024. I think the power improvement has been nice to see, but we're going to get to the end of the season and he's not going to be that much better than he was in 2022. So I think it was probably just a random hot streak. And like you said, he's hitting a lot of fly balls. The average launch angle is up to 20% or 20 degrees in the month of September. So might have just fallen for the power binge a little bit, but I think on the whole, solid player, not the superstar he looked like.
And it's funny the way that these numbers even out because the overall stat line, 290 batting average, 780 OPS, I would say that's probably the expectation that I have for Steven Kwan. Yeah. Just when everything is going normally for him, yeah, really good batting average, solid OPS, he'll get on base. I think it's probably more of like a 8 to 10 homer profile, maybe moving forward, and like 20 plus steals. And that's an okay player. And he's probably much better in a points league, but I think that's probably the expectation. If we're talking, next year and beyond for Steven Kwan.
Like a third outfielder, borderline second in a points league.
Yeah, I think that's fair. CJ Abrams launched a home run here, but he has also had a really bad second half. 176 batting average, 5 homers, 13 steals. The power and speed is obviously, still kind of helpful there. 5 homers, 13 steals, but a 522 OPS. He's another one. He's just hitting way too many fly balls, 50% fly ball rate in the second half, not hitting the ball with authority. It just seems like maybe he's hitting a lot of lazy fly balls that aren't really turning into anything here. But yeah, I mean, this is another dynamic player. And you're obviously not dropping him. And it wouldn't surprise me if he gets hot again for the final couple of weeks. But
yeah, I mean, obviously had the big homer today. It's funny because at least if you're going by Fangraphs data, his fly ball rate is up in the second half, but so is his ground ball rate. It's his line drive rate that has gone to 7%.
Yep.
So it's just suboptimal contact all the way around for CJ Abrams. But for the most part, it's the same amount of contact. The strikeout rate is up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's, like I just said a minute ago, it's a more extreme case of ups and downs of the season, and that it's been a very long down. But I think that's basically what it is, and CJ Abrams is still a must-start player in my eyes.
Yeah, I think his swing's probably a little wonky. Like you said, fly ball and ground ball rate both up. That's not what you want.
No.
Just as a general rule, it means you're not hitting any line drives, and line drives are still the best thing you can do as a hitter. So yeah, like he's got a 198 BABIP in the second half. Well, his XBA in July, August, and September is 190 or lower. So he's just not hitting the ball well right now. But one thing I will point out is there was some hand-wringing about his poor stolen base totals early on and about how he was getting caught stealing too much. He's 13 for 15 on steals in the second half. So that's a good sign. I think you're still looking at a guy who, he's got 28 stolen bases. He's probably going to get to like 35-ish. I think you probably still feel like he's a 40 steal guy next year. The bat is a question, though. It was a question coming in. Looked like he answered it. Now we're getting a very different answer in the second half that, I don't know, makes me think he's probably more like the guy we drafted him as before this season. So a top 50-ish pick in Roto, but probably not the top 25 pick it looked like he was going to be.
Yeah, and it's still relatively early in his career, but I think we've maybe seen enough to conclude that he's just going to be a really streaky player for fantasy. So if you play in head-to-head formats where like consistency matters more, even head-to-head categories, maybe he's a player you devalue a little bit in that format. But yeah, in Roto, I think most years when you look up at the end of the season, you're probably just going to have pretty solid power and speed numbers there from CJ Abrams. Somebody on Twitter asked us to talk about Royce Lewis, admittedly a name I haven't looked into in a while. And in 42 games since returning from the IL in late July, he's batting .221 with 6 homers, 28 RBI, and a .685 OPS. And another one where the line drive rate is really low during that stretch. Fly ball rate is up. Quality of contact is not good. So kind of feels like, again, maybe he's trying a little bit too hard to lift the ball and hit for some power. I mean, as is always the case, you wonder is Royce Lewis playing through something right now? He's been on the IL a few times this year. And, he's another player where the talent level is just so massive. Can you really tell someone to bench him over the final couple of weeks of the season? Probably not.
Yeah, this is the most difficult one for me because as good as he's been for stretches, the sample was always so small that I don't know that we really have a good idea who Royce Lewis is yet. And at the end of this season, with the way this stretch has gone for him, the data's not going to look that good. The StatCast page isn't going to look that good. It's, clearly going to be worse than last year. I think he's probably closer to must start than not when he's healthy, but I'm not as sure what we're looking at with him. So Yeah, I'm. You got to weigh your options, obviously. I don't think you have to keep him in your lineup, but in most cases, you're probably going to want to.
Again, that is Royce Lewis. Let's move on to some waiver wire pitchers from Wednesday's action. And the first group includes Shane Baz, who was solid at the Phillies, 5 1/3, 2 runs allowed with 4 strikeouts. Jake Irvin took a no-hitter into the 6th inning up against the Braves. 6 innings, 1 run, 5 strikeouts for him. His previous 11 starts, a 6.90 ERA and a 1.58 WHIP. Dean Kramer had himself a strong outing at the Red Sox, 7 innings, 2 runs. Only one of those earned, 7 strikeouts, 17 whiffs on 103 pitches for Dean Kramer. And last 6 outings, he's actually been really good. 2.62 ERA and a 1.17 WHIP. And of course, Matthew Boyd. How many times has this happened where we tout a pitcher against the White Sox where it just looks like it's lining up so well and then it just doesn't happen? 4 1/3 innings, 4 runs, only one of those earned. The Guardians had 3 errors behind him in this game. Still had 9 strikeouts, 17 whiffs. Normally, we reserve waiver wire pitchers for good performances here, but the overall numbers are still good for Matthew Boyd, and it looks like he lines up for a 2-star pitcher next week. So 60% rostered there for Matthew Boyd. Quickly just mention the matchups. Boyd is home against the Twins at the Cardinals. Dean Kramer is home against the Giants. Jake Irvin could be a 2-star pitcher at the Mets and at the Cubs. And then Shane Baz looks like versus the Red Sox and the Blue Jays next week. So, Chris, I'll give you the first word here. 4 pitchers. It looks like 3 of them could be 2-start options.
Yeah, I can't say I'm super excited about any of these guys in a Roto league, at least for next week and the next 2 weeks. Baz, I think there's still a lot to like in the long run, but 7.5 K per 9, a 427 FIP, and then 2 of his final 3 starts are versus Boston. I think I'd prefer to avoid him. And in at least one league, I sat him this week with just the 1 start against Philadelphia. So I definitely don't think Shane Baz is a must roster pitcher and certainly not a must start pitcher with those matchups. Of the rest of them, I'm varying degrees of uninterested in all of them. Irvin, it's been really up and down. We've seen some really high highs, but given how bad he'd been prior to this, I don't think I can look at New York Mets, at Chicago Cubs next week and think that he's anything more than a head-to-head point streamer. Kramer might actually be the one I'm most interested in for streaming, but even that,
He's been on a nice run lately, has Kramer. And I feel like he's one of those pitchers who ensnares me repeatedly when he has a good stretch like this. And then I recommend him for his next few starts and they're not good. And then he goes on another run like this, but he is on a good run right now. Last 6 starts, 2.62 ERA, 1.17 WHIP, 8.4 K per 9 for Dean Kramer, who has a good offense backing him, tends to go deep into games when he's pitching well. Giants is a pretty good matchup. He might be among my sleeper pitchers for next week, but the one of these 4 that I can commit to absolutely being a sleeper pitcher for me next week is Matthew Boyd with the 2 starts, one of them being a good matchup against the Cardinals and a guy who has pretty good strikeout upside. It was weird in the start against the White Sox how he hardly threw his slider.
Yeah.
Which I believe was his most used pitch in his it was his most used pitch in his great start against the Dodgers last time out. And then he just hardly threw it in this one. So that was weird. But for it being a disappointing start, he still got 9 strikeouts in 4 1/3 innings. So it wasn't like a total loss for fantasy. And again, 2-start week next week. I think I'd stick with Boyd for at least one more lineup period.
3 names in deeper leagues. Bailey Falter was awesome up against the Marlins. 7 1/3 shutout innings with 5 strikeouts, 20 whiffs on 93 pitches. Lance Lynn, solid in his return against the Reds. 5 innings, 1 run, 7 strikeouts. And Joey Estes turned in a quality start at the Astros. 6 2/3, 3 runs allowed with 2 strikeouts. And in the second half, Estes has a 3.29 ERA, a 1.06 WHIP. I'll say it again every time he pitches. The underlying numbers do not buy it at all, but he keeps pitching well. I don't really know how. Any of these names matter, and 15-team roto leagues or deeper, Estes, Lance Lynn, Bailey Fulton.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I do want me to say I could probably come up with more things to say, but I just
was
don't think it's worth the
worried that
airtime.
Scott was going to like say something positive about one of these guys, but I'm glad he didn't.
Yeah, it's really fine with me.
Joey Estes has a really high fly ball rate, and sometimes that can lead to good starts, like really high. Like we were talking about Bryan Woo being high and Bowden Francis being high. Joey Estes considerably higher than that.
Week 27 at Seattle, I could be talked into streaming Joey Estes for the final week of the season.
All right. Wanted to mention with Bobby Miller still rostered in 52% of CBS leagues. I realize there's probably a good amount of people who are not paying attention to fantasy baseball at this point in the season. If you are one of them and you have Bobby Miller and it's not a dynasty league, I think you could probably drop him for
it is
almost
so
anybody
weird.
we talked about.
He still throws 97 to 99 miles an hour, and his fastball stinks. He got 2 whiffs. He got 92 mile per hour average exit velocity against it with today. Like, it's so weird.
Yes.
But it's been the case all season. Both of his fastballs were very bad again today. So yeah, Bobby Miller.
But that
I might be interested in him next year as a post type sleeper, but yeah, you can drop him.
Well, I was going to say a bad fastball can be a fatal flaw for some pitchers. I don't think it is in Bobby Miller's case, which is why his rookie season was so good. He doesn't lean on his fastballs as much as you'd think for a young guy who throws that hard, and he has a deep secondary arsenal. So I don't know that the fastball is to blame for his bad season, but it's not getting any better. And
it's not helping.
I think, yeah, sure. And I think we're pretty much done with him till next season.
He's going to be a fascinating player to talk about in the offseason. I do wonder the shoulder injury that popped up early on. How much did that contribute? Did that just cause a lost season here for Bobby Miller? I think it's entirely possible. Maybe I'm just making excuses for the guy. Who knows? Let's take our final break. And when we return, some waiver wire hitters, we will take a look into the 2025 crystal ball. We'll do that right after this.
Today, with the support of the NFL, a new playbook is being written. The National Gay Flag Football League provides inclusive play for over 4,000 LGBTQ plus players and allies. Here is a home with no penalty for being you.
Welcome back in. Some waiver wire hitters from Wednesday's action in the shallowest 3 outfielder leagues. 4 names. Lane Thomas has picked things back up in September, batting .405, 3 homers, 13 RBI, and 1178 OPS. Kerry Carpenter had himself a big game, 4 for 4 with a double, a triple, a run, and an RBI. 23 games since returning from the IL, 313 batting average, 6 homers, and an OPS just over 1,000. Taylor Ward stayed hot, 1 for 4 with his 23rd home run, having a big second half here. And Tommy Edman is really coming alive, back-to-back days with a double dong, 4 home runs over those past 2 games. And in 21 games with the Dodgers, a 300 batting average, 4 homers, 5 steals, and 821 OPS. Scott, how are you ranking this group? Maybe for next week. I don't know if you have the matchups at hand yet, but off the top of the dome, Edman, Taylor Ward, Kerry Carpenter, and Lane Thomas.
Well, since I last week looked ahead at the final 3 weeks at which teams had the best upcoming matchups, I can tell you that both Taylor Ward and Tommy Edman were among the hitters I recommended picking up for the final 3 weeks. I don't know exactly how the second of those final 3 weeks worked into that, but I think they're probably the most interesting 2 on this list regardless. Ward, mostly because we've seen him have streaks like this where he looks like a must-start outfielder, and it lasts for several weeks, and then he disappears for a few months, and then he comes back and has another stretch like this. It's usually at the start of the season and at the end of the season. Here we are in September. It's happening again for Taylor Ward. So I'm gonna trust in that to some degree. And Tommy Edman in a great lineup. Can start him at like 3 different positions, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Obviously going to provide you some speed, and has looked exactly like Tommy Edman since coming back from that wrist injury that sidelined him for so long. So I think he's startable if he happens to fill second base, shortstop, or outfield and need one of those 3 positions.
3 names in deeper leagues. Mike Yastrzemski has picked up the power lately. Last 15 games, he's got 6 home runs and an OPS over 1,000. Tommy Pham, who I think I've mentioned every day this week, he likes hitting for the Royals so far. 3 for 4 in this one. He's batting .317, 2 homers, 1 steal, .876 OPS in 10 games with Kansas City. He has led off all of those. And Trey Sweeney, who was recently called up by the Tigers, he's done some nice things here. 1 for 4 with his 4th home run. He's got 2 steals, a .756 OPS so far. Chris, any of these names catch your attention in deeper formats? Yastrzemski, Tommy Pham, Trey Sweeney.
Sweeney, just because he's young and has some prospect pedigree, is moderately interesting, but I don't think he really matters in any mixed leagues outside of maybe really deep 15-teamers. But next week they have 2 left-handed pitchers on the schedule. He hasn't played against lefties much, so might not play every day next week. And I think Tommy Pham is probably worth picking up in categories leagues. He's leading off for a very good lineup. He's hot right now. He's got a little bit of speed. I think Tommy Pham at 19% is probably too under rostered.
Okay. Let's take a peek into the 2025 crystal ball. Look at us, Chris. We're right on the same page. I grabbed this off my shelf. Mark, can you see that? Mark Trumbo signed baseball.
There you go.
Why I have a Mark Trumbo signed baseball, but we are looking into this crystal ball for.
I got this one at the Jackie Robinson Museum.
Ah, very nice. So I'll just ask you some questions pertaining to next year. Have a little fun with it. And first up, Cole Ragans or Blake Snell? I think this is a pretty fascinating discussion for next season. Both had pretty good starts here, and both have lots of strikeout upside. Both maybe walk too many batters. Obviously, Snell has the longer track record here. What do you guys think? Cole Ragans or Blake Snell for 20?
I think this is actually a fairly easy call.
Oh, okay.
It's got to be Ragans, right?
Does it have to be?
Yeah, I think it has to be him. If only, we know the Blake Snell experience. And we know that the person who drafts Blake Snell, even if the numbers at the end of the season are pretty good, the person who drafts Blake Snell is very rarely happy about having done so. And we can say, hey, Blake Snell is going to have his ups and downs. But at the end of the year, you're going to be happy you had him. You know what's actually a lot harder to do is sit there when Blake Snell has that 9 ERA stretch and say, it's fine, he's going to be great. We go through this every year. People drop him every year. I think you have to draft Cole Ragans ahead of him.
Yeah, I agree. Whoever drafts Blake Snell leads the league in ulcers. And you'd rather not put yourself through that when Ragans himself is a borderline ace. I mean, he might end up leading the majors in strikeouts, right? He's up there with Chris Sale and Tarek Skubal. I think it's kind of a 3-horse race. So yeah, I do hold out hope that one of these years Blake Snell is going to be just kind of fine from the start of the year. And then the upside is probably higher than it is for Ragans. And he turned it on. If we're just doing number of starts, we're not doing number of months passed, because obviously he missed a lot of time with injuries. But if we're just doing number of starts before he turned it on, it wasn't nearly as many these last 2 years as it was the previous 2.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's not going to be as bad, but I just rather not take the risk. I'd rather be the one who looks to buy low on Snell when the guy who drafts him is panicking.
Chris, I totally understand your logic and your analysis on Blake Snell. If I'm playing devil's advocate, I will just point out, I know you're very process oriented. Blake Snell, better FIP, better XFIP, better strikeout rate than Cole Reagan's this season.
This season? That sounds true.
Yes.
I would guess it was the opposite last year.
Might be. Yeah.
Snell's FIP actually wasn't all that good last year.
True.
So yeah, I get it. Like Blake Snell might be the better pitcher. I just and look, maybe this is bad process, right? Like maybe it's just you should just think about it as what the numbers at the end of the year are. Maybe
there are players who defy process though. And we've highlighted these, like Jose Altuve, right? Like you can look at the StatCast data and say, wow, why are we drafting Jose Altuve in the third round every year? Well, it's because he finds a way to defy
90 every year. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there are some players who kind of, defy process and defy like some of the,
but in Snell's case, I think Scott put it perfectly. I'd rather be the guy buying low in May.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Luis Gil, solid start up against Kansas City. 5 innings, 1 run, 5 strikeouts, 12 whiffs on 97 pitches. We've talked a ton about how his innings have jumped up so much this year. He's going to be a fascinating one. The crystal ball. Luis Gil will be drafted as a top blank starting pitcher next year.
I'm going to say 50.
Ooh.
I don't think it's going to be like we were saying Bryce Miller and Bryan Woo will crack the top 40. That's all we were giving them. And I'd rather have both of them than Luis Gil next year, given the very short outings we've seen the past couple months. Maybe I shouldn't have put the very in front of it, but more 5-inning outings than 6-inning outings and control issues. And, just hasn't been that impressive since the first half, really.
Yeah. I don't think that's egregious. I was going to say top 40, and I think ranking him around Bryce Miller or Bryan Woo, in my head, it just kind of makes sense right now, but yeah, we'll have more off season to figure that out.
I was going to say top 30, but not by me was going to be my answer of where he gets drafted.
That's very optimistic.
That's not where I'm going to rank him.
Mm-hmm.
But I just I think the distinction between Woo and Miller and Gil is the strikeouts. And strikeouts are usually a stand-in for upside. And I think Gil is going to get the benefit of the doubt there. And especially because he's going to end up throwing about 150-ish innings. And I think people are going to look at that and say, well, yeah, now you can project him to 180 and 230 strikeouts and really gaudy numbers. And I think there's a decent chance it just falls apart on Luis Gil, whether it's performance or injury related.
This is interesting because I'm not sure I've looked at the full stat line for Gil in a while. As the season's going on, I tend to go game by game, and there's a real emphasis on the game log for me. And the game log for Gil just doesn't look that good and hasn't for, like I said, a couple months. But the overall stat line, not taking into account today's game, 3.24 ERA, 1.16 WHIP, 10.4 K per 9. I mean, that looks great. That looks like Luis Castillo. If you're not paying any attention to volume.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why I do think he'll be another fascinating player for this offseason again.
He does lead the majors in walks despite not having that many innings.
Mm-hmm. Let's take a look at Wyatt Langford, who is looking to finish strong here. 2 for 5 with a run scored. Last 18 games, a 3.04 batting average, 3 homers, 3 steals, hitting the ball much harder. Barrel rate is up. Sometimes it just takes time for like these young players to figure things out. I know we wanted him to be a superstar right away. It did not happen. Another one, Wyatt Langford will be drafted as a top blank outfielder next year.
Top 40.
I think that's right.
I'm going to say top 36. It's a small distinction, but it puts him in the 12-team, 3 outfielder starter range. And that's where I think he belongs. I'm actually writing a bold predictions for 2025 article now. And it's going to be 20 bold predictions, unless I get tired and cut it short. I have a list of 20 bold predictions right now. And one of them is that Wyatt Langford will outperform every rookie hitter. Obviously, he himself won't be a rookie hitter anymore, but I think there's enough promising there in the underlying data that I expect him to take a big step forward as a sophomore and basically live up to the expectations we had for him this year. So I think it'll be top 36 where he's drafted, and I think he'll outperform that.
So that would be everyone in the minors. That would be Dylan Cruz. That would be
Jason Dominguez.
Junior
Jason
Caminero.
Dominguez. Oh, okay.
And Junior Caminero, I had one of the bold predictions. I'm just going to give away the whole article. Top 5 third baseman next year. And yet, I still think Wyatt Langford will be better because I think he'll be like a top 15 outfielder when all's said and done.
I think the speed helps there. Caminero is going to be a 0 there.
Mm-hmm. Want to give a shout out, Scott. This time last year, your bold predictions. Tarek Skubal to win the AL Cy Young Award.
I looked at the last, because I'd kept saying I was predicting that since last October, but I looked up last year's version of this article. It was written in September, and the very first one, Tarek Skubal wins AL Cy Young. Some others that were on there, since you brought it up. Chris Sale gets back to being a 200 strikeout pitcher. This is the best one. Alec Burleson is the best outfielder on the Cardinals.
What?
That was in last year's bold predictions article.
Nice.
Yeah. Do I still have it pulled up? I don't think I do. But there were some other good ones in there.
Hey,
the majority were misses because that's how bold predictions work. But there are some pretty impressive ones.
That's impressive enough. I mean, you called the following season Cy Young Award winner in September of last year. So I would say that's pretty good. Last one on the crystal ball front, Francisco Alvarez, 1 for 4 with his 7th home run, 3 RBI in this one. I don't know what to make of him for next year. Maybe he's just been banged up this entire season. He had a torn ligament in his thumb, some shoulder soreness in July. He's now played 214 career games. He has a 218 batting average and a 702 OPS. Does Francisco Alvarez. What are we thinking? Alvarez next season.
I think the injury hypothesis makes some sense, but I will also say that there have been some extremely disappointing quotes from like the Mets hitting brass, like the coaches and whatnot, about Francisco Alvarez. I don't know what the exact quote was. I saw it a couple weeks ago, but it was basically like, we know he can hit for power. What we want him to do first is hit for average and figure out how to make contact and then the power. And like, okay, in theory, yeah, I guess. But like, it really seems like they've neutered the biggest strength in Francisco Alvarez's game. He's just not hitting the ball with authority at all this season. He's not hitting the ball in the air. He's not hitting the ball to the pull side. He's not doing any of the things that you want a power hitter to do. I still think, I mean, he's still 22, right? Like, he's still very young. So I don't want to write him off. He's a very young prospect or a very young catcher. Catchers take longer to develop generally. But it's been a very disappointing second half, especially for Francisco Alvarez.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 22 years old, will turn 23 in November of this season.
I'm thinking top 15 catcher.
I'm going to say top 12 just because there aren't enough good ones to round out the top 12, so I'll probably chase the upside at the end there. Mm-hmm. I opened last year's article. Cole Reagans leads the AL in strikeouts. That may happen. He's right there.
You got it wrong, Scott. I mean, you can't take credit for that.
Michael Busch gets traded somewhere and thrives. I don't know if we call what he's doing thrive.
But he's going to finish with like 24 homers and, decent RBI, right?
That was a two-parter, though, because I said Jonathan Aranda would get traded somewhere and thrive too. By the way,
Busch only has 17 homers.
Jonathan Aranda had a huge game here Wednesday.
I knew you were going to bring it up. I don't have him on the rundown.
Homer and a double.
Be on the rundown,
Homer and a double, baby. It's
Scott,
not over.
This is your Jesus Sanchez.
It is.
Yeah.
Until he gets an honest chance, I will not stop backing Jonathan Aranda.
All right, let's quickly run through some of the leftovers here. Sean Manaea turned in another strong start at the Blue Jays, 6 2/3 innings, 1 run, 8 strikeouts, and over his last 9 outings, 2.64 ERA, .81 WHIP. Zach Wheeler, another quality start, 6 innings, 2 runs, 9 strikeouts. That's now 8 straight quality starts for Zach Wheeler. And Nick Pivetta was great up against the Orioles, 6 innings, 1 run, 9 strikeouts. and that is 3 straight quality starts for Pivetta.
Excuse me. Put some respect on Nick Pivetta.
Nope.
It wasn't technically a quality start because he didn't start the game, but during this stretch, remember, he also had that start against Toronto that in the box score technically happened in June, but did occur in our time frame within the last 4, where he struck out 9 over 6 one-run innings. He's been really good lately.
Mm-hmm.
It's Nick Pivetta, though.
Yeah.
So, like, the good stretches are invariably followed by very, very bad stretches. And I don't see any reason to think that won't happen, whether it be in the final 3 starts of the season, although he has very good matchups, or inevitably in 2025 when we talk ourselves into him for one reason or another.
He does look like a 2-star pitcher next week at Tampa Bay and home against the Minnesota Twins. In a points league as a SPARP, okay. Anywhere else, no.
If you're chasing strikeouts, I think he's a very fine option.
Yeah, I mean, 3 quality starts in a row, 1 really good matchup there at the start of the week. I think he's going to be pretty high on the 2-star pitcher rankings.
Some hitting leftovers. Francisco Lindor, 1 for 4 with a game-tying solo home run in the 9th inning to break up that no-hitter for Bowden Francis. Nick Castellanos got off to a really slow start, but since June has basically been Nick Castellanos. 267 batting average, 13 home runs, and an OPS right around 800. Tyler O'Neill is heating back up. He hit a 3-run walk-off home run, and he has 5 home runs in his past 5 games. Cody Bellinger, big revenge week against the Dodgers. 1 for 3 with his 17th home run, and I believe that's 2 home runs in 3 games. Or is it 3? Has he homered in all 3 games this week? He might. I don't know. Cody Bellinger? Anybody?
I don't know. Sorry.
No, it's 2 in 3 games, yeah, for Bellinger this week. Some bullpen updates for the Pirates. Aroldis Chapman was unavailable. David Bednar got the 9th inning with a 3-run lead. He got 2 outs, but gave up an unearned run on 2 hits. He was pulled for Jalen Beeks, who got the final out for his 10th save. For the Guardians, Emmanuel Clase gave up a hit, but struck out 2 for his 44th save. For the Blue Jays, Chad Green entered the 9th inning with the game tied. He was charged with 4 runs on 3 walks and a hit. He took his 6th loss. And Chad Green has 5 appearances in September, 22.85 ERA, and a 2.77 whip. For the Mets, Edwin Diaz.
Let's get into that a little bit because, after blowing 4 consecutive save chances, you might think the Blue Jays would be looking to make a change there. As bad as Chad Green is, his numbers are still the best of any Blue Jays reliever. That doesn't mean they won't pull him. Yenesis Cabrera, a left-hander, would probably be the next choice. Their right-handed setup man, Eric Swanson, I think has an ERA around 6. So I don't know. I don't know that you really want anybody from this bullpen other than Chad Green is what I'm trying to say. And yet, I don't know that you can just trust Chad Green right now.
For the Mets, Edwin Diaz entered with 2 outs in the 9th, a 4-run lead, and runners on 1st and 2nd. He got the final out for his 18th save. For the Tigers, Jason Foley walked 1 but struck out 2 for his 22nd save. For the Phillies, Carlos Estevez got the 9th with a 1-run lead. He gave up a hit but picked up his 25th save. For the Twins, Yohan Duran got the 9th inning, 3-run lead, gave up 1 run on 3 hits but picked up his 23rd save. For the Yankees, Clay Holmes, he's back, not really, entered in the 7th inning with a 1-run lead, facing 9-1-2 in the Royals lineup. He gave up a run on 2 hits, took his league-leading 12th blown save of the season. Luke Weaver eventually recorded 5 perfect outs in extra innings. He struck out 3, and he earned his 5th win of the season. For the Cardinals, Ryan Helsley struck out 1 for his 44th save. Him and Class A are tied once again. For the A's, Mason Miller picked up his 24th save. And for the Dodgers, Michael Kopech walked 3, gave up a run, but did pick up his 13th save of the season. To stream or not to stream on Thursday, we have Frankie Montas at the Giants. Kumar Rocker is making his debut against the Mariners. Gavin Williams faces Tampa Bay. Mitchell Parker gets the Marlins. Jacob Junis at the Cardinals. I don't know.
I could see a good start from Mitchell Parker. I could see a good start from Gavin Williams. But Frankie Montas and Kumar Rocker are the only ones I'm actually interested in.
Yeah, I agree. But, I mean, just by virtue of it being his major league debut, I understand how good he looked in the minors, and the Mariners obviously a good matchup. I don't know that I could realistically start Rocker outside of a desperation situation.
And then on Friday, we have DJ Hers is up against the Marlins.
Like that one.
Zach Littell is at the Guardians. Landon Knack is at the Braves.
Braves have been making a lot of pitchers look good lately.
Yep.
Tobias Myers is at the D-backs.
Nah.
Man, I mean, if you want to put the stream anyone against the White Sox to test, JT Ginn of the Oakland A's.
He hasn't been bad his last couple starts.
Yeah.
But he would be my third choice from Friday behind Knack and Hers.
Yep.
All right. We are going to wrap there for Scott and Chris. I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. And we will be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.